We all go through different chapters in our lives, some stranger than others. Welcome to Strange Chapters, where we bring you true stories of the strange, the macabre, the paranormal, and the supernatural. So sit back, relax, and let's get to this week's featured author and their stories. Today, we bring you 3 stories from Whispers in the Dark, true ghost stories and eerie tales from paranormal author, investigator, and researcher Cyn Shrader Hill. Cyn Shrader Hill's books are available on Amazon, Kindle, and wherever fine books are sold, and you can find links to all of her books in the show notes below. Story 1. Abandoned House. One dark night, a few of us decided to visit an old abandoned house on a gravel road out in the country. We heard several stories about a man in a top hat that would stand behind someone as they looked into the mirror. We went to search for that mirror and hoped to find the gentleman that liked to dress so formally. We found the house in shambles, but at one time it must have been a lovely home. Strangely, whoever had lived there left a lot of their furniture behind. In the past, these belongings would have been stately, but the beautiful antiques with ornate wood carvings were now shattered and beyond hope of repair. Everything had fallen to ruin. It was sad. This looked like the perfect setting for a horror movie. The front door stood permanently open for anyone to wander inside. The room to the left of the doorway was not safe to walk in, since the floor had fallen through, taking all the vintage pieces with it. There were piles of debris scattered from one side to the other. The only thing left standing was a stone fireplace starting in the basement with a chimney stretching through the roof of the second floor. To the right of the front door was some type of living area, perhaps a den or a library. The foyer itself was a long, thin room stretching to the back of the original house with a staircase leading to the second floor. We'd walk through the room on the right to reach the dining room. There, a large, heavy, old walnut table stood in the center of the room. Old cabinets held nothing but broken glass, and the wallpaper was curling off the wall. On the far side of the table, you could see down into the basement several feet below. Stepping carefully around the old floor, we would cut through the central doorway that opened back into the foyer to go upstairs. We climbed the staircase one person at a time. The railing leading up the stairs and around the top floor was long gone. Once upstairs, we found that someone had used the room to the left as a bedroom. There were still old mattresses there. Across the upstairs hall, the room on the right had fallen all the way through so that you could see the first floor and the still standing fireplace. There was another bedroom on the other side of the fireplace with a bathroom that supposedly held a mirror you could stare into, but it wasn't safe to walk. Hopefully, Mr. Top Hat would join us somewhere else in the house. Downstairs, we'd place our recorders and other instruments on the old walnut table to try to capture any spirit speaking to us. Our first investigation was creepy, but relatively uneventful, and we knew we'd come back another time. Several months passed before we had a chance to return. Walking through the front door of our second investigation, I noticed a little barn swallow had taken over the foyer entry light, using the glass dome as her nest. She watched warily as we walked beneath her, heading toward the dining room. There were 4 of us there that night, and we found the furniture remnants to be in even more disrepair than our first visit. The table itself had fallen, and as I held up one side, Sean reached for a table leg so he could replace it and set the table straight. Only the leg jumped out of Sean's hands. I saw it. The table leg jumped out of his hands and went through the floor to the basement below. "What just happened?" Sean asked, a little surprised. "I don't know," I answered as I shook my head. "But did you see that?" he continued. "Yes, but I don't understand it. What just happened?" Sean was shaking his head incredulously with eyebrows raised. "I don't know, but it felt like someone ripped the table leg from my hands, and the next thing I knew, it was in the basement. You saw it, right?" I had, and it would be something I'd replay in my mind over and over, trying to figure it out. We could only prop the table up with an old chair after that, and so we did. We could then place our recorders and other instruments there. The 4 of us decided to do an EVP session, and Sean got his video camera out to film. We began asking questions, hoping to get answers from the spirits, especially the man in the top hat. Suddenly, the other male in our group quietly said, "Something's touching me." Eerily, as we looked, we could see 2 strands of his hair being lifted up by unseen hands. I quickly grabbed my digital camera to take pictures, so Sean swung the video camera to focus on the weird sight. Checking to make sure it was recording, We documented until the other guy said, "I need a break," and he walked through the room and out the front door. Sean followed him to show him the video, only the video wasn't there. Nothing had recorded the entire session, and Sean was sure the camera was in good working order. In fact, once outside, the camera recorded easily. He came back inside to try to videotape again. We started another session, but it was cut short when Sean asked for a sign from the spirits. "Can you knock on the wall like this?" As he knocked twice. In the near darkness, lit only by flashlights, we received no knocks in reply. But suddenly a loud thud hit the foyer wall near the staircase. It rang out in the silence, shattering our group's resolve to continue. It was time to leave. We had been warned. Weeks later, I visited the site alone one sunny afternoon. I walked around the property, taking photos, all the while feeling eyes watching me from inside and from the woods behind the old house. The barn swallow was gone, but the house looked just like we had left it before. Last year, I heard that the old house had burned to the ground and decided to visit for myself one more time. It had indeed burned. All that was left was the bare bones of the structure, front steps, concrete porch, basement rock walls, and the 2 old stone fireplaces still reaching up into the night sky. All the beautiful pieces of furniture had turned to ash. The wraparound concrete porch now resembled a subway platform, strangely out of place in the country. Looking down, you could see rocks, ash, and an occasional piece of metal left behind. The house was silent now, and only a feeling of sadness remained. Any strong sense of negativity had departed after the fire. The house was gone, the sad remnants scattered, but the woods behind the house site still stood watch. Story 2. Attachments. My husband and I have been married just over 5 years now. When I moved into his bachelor pad, we began making it our family home. Him, me, and as soon as we finished moving everything in, my cat, Bella, who was then at my mother's house. When we had time, we moved a few more boxes and then unpacked them. It took several months before Bella joined us. During that time, I discovered something interesting about my new home. It already had a pet. To be exact, we had the spirit of a cat living with us. The first time I noticed it, I was almost asleep. My husband, an early bird, had already fallen asleep a couple hours before. While drifting off, I felt Bella jump onto the bed at my feet. She started delicately stepping in a small circle until she decided which direction to face, and then she settled down. Smiling sleepily, I closed my eyes. Then suddenly, I remembered Bella wasn't living with us yet. I knew I hadn't imagined anything. I most definitely sensed a cat, now lying quietly at my feet. Relaxing, I smiled again and slept. The cat didn't jump onto the bed every night, but she did often enough that I could point it out to my husband when it happened, and he understood what I meant. He told me of a few times he had felt the sensation of something close to the foot of the bed. We both got used to the company. On one of our first vacations as a married couple, we traveled to Lake Erie, then went through Ohio to the western portion of Pennsylvania to visit my husband's extended family. He showed me where he'd lived and gone to school, as well as places he had been, all the while telling me stories of his childhood. He introduced me to the family he missed after moving to Tennessee when he was 15. During our trip, we enjoyed visiting the relatives of both parents, then drove to Pittsburgh for the evening. It was there I was hit with a terrible case of food poisoning that sent me to bed for the next 24 hours. When I began feeling a little better, we continued our vacation driving across the state to Lancaster and then later on to Valley Forge. It was very hot the day we visited the historical park, and still not feeling my best, I had to sit down often to rest. We made our way to the Visitor Center Museum, and I found a bench to sit on inside the air-conditioned building, while my husband brought the truck closer. When it was time to leave, we got in the vehicle and drove toward Philadelphia. There, I finally started feeling much better, so we were able to walk around, touring the historic areas, and even ate a Philly cheesesteak before leaving the city. Heading south, we drove through Shenandoah National Park, admiring the beautiful scenery, then headed back to Tennessee. When we got home, we unpacked and settled back into our normal routines. It wasn't long before I realized we had someone else in the house with us. One afternoon alone, I heard a strange rustling sound, but I couldn't pinpoint it. I got my digital recorder out, and turning it on, I walked from room to room, saying, "I know you're here because I can hear you moving, but I can't see you." Going back into one of the rooms, I said, "I'm turning the light on now." Upon review of my recording at that exact moment, the electronic voice phenomena I caught was a Class A, meaning you could easily hear and understand it with your own ears. The voice said, "Thank you." Excited about the Class A EVP, I asked many more questions, dowsing with copper rods and recording everything. I discovered a nurse had attached to me while I was still not feeling well at Valley Forge and came all the way back home with us, trying to help me feel better. I was genuinely surprised and touched Thankful she had cared enough to look after me. The nurse stayed for several months with us and our spirit cat. I began to sense she needed to move on, but was unsure if she should. I talked to my friend Penny, who told me to thank the spirit, then wish her home, and I did. Afterward, I guess it was a few weeks later, I realized we hadn't had our ghost cat jump onto the bed in a while. I kept waiting, but it never happened again. It seems the nurse and the cat became buddies, so when she left, the cat did as well. My cat, Bella, has since become the little lady of the house. She occasionally jumps up onto the foot of the bed after my husband leaves in the early mornings for work, but she prefers another area. Her favorite spot is the window seat where she can watch the birds and squirrels on the feeders outside, and then she peacefully naps in the sun coming through the glass. Once in a while, I think about the sweet nurse and the phantom cat. Did she return to Valley Forge, taking the cat with her? Hopefully they were able to cross over when I wish the nurse home. I sincerely hope they found the perfect destination and can now rest in forever peace. I just would like for them to know that while they lived in my home, they each brought happiness and a feeling of wonder that I will never forget. Story 3, Paranormal Email. In September of 2015, I received a text message from a troubled girl who wanted me to help her understand the voices she was hearing. She said she was being followed. I replied with my email address, and she sent a video. Unfortunately, the audio was not included, so I was not able to hear any electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs. I could only tell her I saw nothing paranormal in her evidence. She then emailed several clips from separate rooms in her apartment and even one from her parked car. There was only one I couldn't use because she had the radio on and was too close to her recorder. I reached in, pulling out one EVP from each of the other clips, and emailed the deciphered messages back to her. I shut down my computer for the night, and without going into detail, my husband and I had an argument that evening, but we were able to come to an agreement before the night ended. During this time, the girl sent me a short email with another audio clip attached. I opened it the next evening and began analyzing the clip. The first EVP I was able to obtain called the girl by name, said they wanted her out of the house, and asked if she would leave. Then I heard the second message, but this one was different. This one spoke directly to me. They called me by my name and talked about the argument we had had the night before. They said they could help me fix the problem if I would just visit them. I couldn't breathe. In fact, I freaked out enough to tell my husband, even though he usually doesn't get involved with any of the paranormal pursuits. He couldn't quite understand them, and he didn't understand what had happened. I couldn't understand what had happened either. I saved everything I had, and after emailing the girl her message, not mine, I stopped working for the night. In my reply email, I told her I would not be able to help her further. The next day, the girl sent me another email begging me to speak with her brother, who was a policeman, because finally she had someone who believed her. Her brother, like others around her, thought her complaints were all in her head. Reluctantly, I told her he could call me. Soon after, I received a phone call from the officer, who was incredulous, mostly because his sister finally had a form of validation no one else had offered. He told me the many police reports she had made the last several months of harassment and stalking, which no one could prove. Although his belief made him extremely skeptical, he realized there was more to his sister's complaints than merely an overactive imagination or need for attention. The results I found clearly showed the girl was being bullied by a couple of intelligent spirits. They also knew no one believed her and found that entertaining. The worst part was that the girl could see the entities, but she thought they were living people following her, and she saw them everywhere and daily. Her family thought she was out of her mind, and unfortunately those spirits were pushing her closer to insanity. The officer and I had a long conversation over the reports I'd emailed his sister and what could be done. He asked if I could travel there, but it was too far. I suggested an area paranormal team that could perform a smudging ritual using white sage and advised prayers for the archangels to protect his sister. I can only hope they carried out my advice for the girl's sake. I haven't spoken to either since. One thing still bothered me. I couldn't understand how the spirits that were harassing that girl came through an email. How did they know anything about me, my husband, or the argument we had had? How had they even come out through an email? I reached out to the only person I knew who could possibly help, Mark Foltz, my psychic medium friend. After he calmed me down, he explained it was all a clever trick spirits use to get inside your head without really being there. Mark continued by telling me spirits and entities can read a person's aura, picking up any information within 48 hours of what was said or done. He says it can take 3 or 4 days for the imprints to leave the recorded energy fields of the aura entirely. Mark told me to be safe. I should always clear my aura before working with the paranormal. This can be done by meditation, prayer, cleansing, and grounding. He sent me a couple of countdown meditation to reset my aura and told me to cut ties with the girl and her family, which I'd already done. I never thought of grounding myself before analyzing audio, but I'm much more careful in all circumstances of the paranormal investigations now. Well, that's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed these 3 tales from Whispers in the Dark, true ghost stories and eerie tales from paranormal author, researcher, and investigator Cyn Shrader Hill. Make sure you click those links below and go grab your own copy and read the rest of the amazing stories in this book. We will see you next time. Stay safe out there and stay strange.